So today we will be reading from An Illustrated Treasury of Swedish Folk and Fairy Tales by John Bauer. And the first story will be When Mother Troll Took in the King's Washing by Elsa Beskow. Life on the Great Mountain was becoming difficult for the trolls as more and more people moved to live alongside them. When Father Troll was young, there had not been a single cottage within 30 miles, but now settler after settler arrived and cleared patches of the forest. It would have angered any troll to hear all that cutting and sawing, see the smoke rising from charcoal burners' kilns, and smell the fried bacon and coffee from the newly built cottages. Every time Father Troll mentioned the coffee, Mother Troll said, "Ugh!" Food was becoming scarce too. In the old days, the forest and the mountains had been full of wolves and bears and foxes, and the trolls had feasted every day on wolf chops, bear ham, and foxtail soup. Now, with dangers like traps and snares in the forest, the wild animals were moving away. While looking in sheepfold for something tasty for breakfast, Mother Troll herself had been caught in a fox trap and nearly lost her own tail. If it weren't for the people's dogs, life on the mountain might still have been bearable. Then Father Troll would have been able to get to the sweet cattle. But that was quite impossible, with the dogs barking and howling and snapping at his heels and tail. No, it was too much, and eventually most of the trolls moved north. At last only Father Troll, with his wife and son, was left on the great mountain, and he was determined not to go. Wasn't it his very own mountain, where his family had lived for 3,000 years? When his wife spoke of moving, he snarled in anger. He became more cross and sullen as time passed, and at last wouldn't leave the mountain at all. So the old woman and boy had to fend for themselves as best they could. Then one day, an unthinkable thing happened. The people began to blow up the great mountain. A young blacksmith discovered copper on the mountain, so he and his neighbors decided to mine there. When the first charge of dynamite exploded, Father Troll became so angry that he exploded too. He really did. He fizzled with rage and then collapsed and lay like a large stone in all the rubble. Mother Troll and her son were left alone in the world with no place to turn. They could not stay on a mountain where people were blowing it up. "We must leave and go north into the wilderness," said the boy. But Mother Troll, she had ideas of her own, of which she had never spoken to Father Troll, even though she had mulled over them for a long time. Privately, she liked the smell of bacon fat and coffee, and would sneak out at night to get a whiff, and to peek through the cottage's little windows to see what the people were doing. The more she had smelled the coffee and the delicious frying bacon fat, and the longer she had stared into the little cottage windows, the more she had come to believe that it looked much nicer to live the way that people did. And at last, her old troll brain had come up with a plan. By the forest lake, 2 or 3 miles from Great Mountain, was an abandoned cottage. The old man who owned it had died 6 years ago, and no one had lived there since. Mother Troll and her son, Drule, would move there. She had snatched quite a few clothes on her nightly visits to the farmhouses, so they would carefully tie up their tails, put on clothes, and live like people. Best of all, they would boil coffee and fry that delicious bacon, just like the people did. First, they had to get some of those little round things called money. But old Mother Troll had an idea about that too. 4 miles south at Stonehill Croft lived a farm wife who made a living for herself and her children by taking in washing. For hours Mother Troll had peered at the farm wife doing her laundry in the wash house, and she had watched the farm wife accepting those round shiny things called money for what she did, and then later send her children to the village to exchange them for coffee, milk, and bacon. Mother Troll's big troll kettle was ideal for washing, and with a pinch of troll powder in the water, the wash would soon be white as snow. As easy as that. Mother Troll had her wits about her. Life could be very different from sitting on the mountain, gnawing on rabbit bones. Well, the boy troll, who was not used to thinking so much at once, was amazed when his mother told him all this, and clutched his head with both his big hands. But the thought of delicious fried bacon overcame his worries, and when evening came, Mother Troll and her son left Great Mountain. They bundled their belongings on their backs and carried their troll kettle between them on a pole. And then they trotted away to the little cottage by the lake to begin living like people. The next day, someone knocked on the kitchen door of the village parsonage. There stood an ugly old woman with a shawl pulled over her eyes and her hands in her apron. "I am a poor woman and have no money," she croaked. "Would the honorable gentlefolk allow me to do their washing?" As it happened, important visitors were expected at the parsonage in the morning, so beer needed brewing and bread baking, and the house needed dusting and scrubbing. There was so much to do that the parson's wife decided that the poor old woman, who was so anxious to work, should take the washing home. The parson's wife herself would decide the price when the wash was returned, and she could see if it was fine and white. Mother Troll went home delighted beyond words, and the next morning, before sunrise, she and her son appeared at the parsonage with an old cart they found in a shed and tugged the laundry home to their croft. The troll powder made the washing beautiful, and the parson's wife was very surprised to have it all back in a few days, dry and white as snow. The parson's wife told the sheriff's wife, and the shopkeeper's wife, and the wives of the more well-to-do farmers about the washerwife in the forest. And that washerwife was a godsend, the parson's wife said, and you could pay her what you liked, for the old crone could not count, and was deeply grateful for whatever she received. Well, soon Mother Troll had such washing as she could wish for. It wasn't hard work either. She and Drooly filled the big kettle with water, poured in the troll powder, and lit the fire. The minute the clothes were put in the kettle, they turned snow white. Afterwards, the trolls wrung the clothes and hung them out to dry. If there was no wind, the old woman would just wave her troll apron, one of the few things she had kept from her old life, and right away a lovely breeze would spring up and dry the clothes in an hour. The trolls did so well that they bought a horse and a cart to fetch the washing, and Drooly bought himself a green necktie with red polka dots from the country store. Those were happy days for the trolls. Coffee pot boiled on the fire all day long, and bacon sizzled in the frying pan. Now, it so happened that a king had decided to build a castle not far away. The queen was sickly, and he wanted her to recover in the pure forest air. That summer, the queen and her little baby princess, only a few months old, came to live in the castle. One day, the queen's lady-in-waiting visited the parsonage, and talk turned to the old washerwife and her son, who were so ugly and so shy and so absurdly afraid of dogs, but who washed laundry so quickly and so cheaply that no one did their own anymore. The lady-in-waiting, who was responsible for all the royal laundry, listened attentively and decided that she too would use her. It is easy to imagine how surprised the trolls were when they were called to the king's castle. The troll boy, afraid of the royal hounds, did not want to go, but in the end, he sat out in the rattling cart, in his new necktie, with his cap pulled down far over his straggly hair, and succeeded in bringing home the royal laundry without any mishaps. Mother Troll had never seen anything as sweet as all the baby princess's pretty little clothes, the tiny embroidered vests and nightgowns. She gazed for a long while and held up the little gowns with her long crooked fingers, and then she called the boy to admire them too, but he did not understand such things. "Listen, Drooly," Mother Troll said, nudging him. "One day when you marry, you must give your own little mite such things." "Fiddlesticks," said the son sullenly. A troll child would never wear such dainty things. Troll child, the mother cried shrilly. You're not going to marry a troll, are you? Now that we're almost people. Oh no, a fine wife with soft yellow hair is what you will have. And then you will have the sweetest little children with golden curls. Hush-a-bye, baby. Sleep, little baby, she crooned, rocking the baby clothes back and forth in her arms. You're dreaming, her son said angrily, kicking the bucket of washing. Who will have me? But once Mother Troll got an idea in her head, it stayed, and she took several of the princess's gowns and hid them in her chest. Now, see that you distract them with a little troll rhyme when they come to count the washing, she ordered her son, as he was leaving to take the laundry back to the castle. You haven't taken leave of your senses, have you? It turned out very well. Every week the son collected the king's washing, and every week Mother Troll kept another little piece of clothing. But when the troll washing was counted, nothing was ever found missing. Some weeks had passed when the royal nurse announced that the lady in waiting, that the princess's little dresses were mysteriously disappearing. They suspected a castle servant was stealing them because nothing had ever been lost by the old washerwife. Their suspicions fell upon a young orphan girl named Inga, who mended the linens and sewed the buttons and ribbons into the princess's clothes. Inga protested her innocence, but it made no difference. And when two small garments were discovered in Inga's chamber, which she had said she had taken there to mend, it seemed to prove that she was the thief. No one, not even her friend, the queen's page, believed her. That very day, she was sent away from the castle. Inga trudged along the highway. She did not know where to go. All she knew was that she wanted to get as far away from the castle as possible, from those who believed her a thief. There was no one in the whole world to whom she could turn, for who would take in a thief? At last, late one evening, she came to a small cottage by a lake in the forest. She walked to the edge of the lake and looked into the calm, mirrored water. She thought how wonderful it would be to dive down into the cool lake and swim and never see people again. Then she felt someone pulling at her skirt. An ugly old woman wearing a black shawl was standing behind her. The woman's big mouth widened in a smile, and her little eyes gave a friendly wink. You should not be out in the cold so late in the evening, she said in a gravelly voice. Come to the cottage with me. Well, Inga was afraid of the old crone, but she followed her because she was touched that someone had shown her kindness. As Inga entered the croft, she saw a boy with straggly hair and realized it was the washerwife of the forest and her son who had taken her in, which made her feel safer. The old woman asked her to stay and help about the house, and Inga accepted gratefully because she had nowhere else to go. To be sure, she found both the woman and her son peculiar in their ways, but, she reasoned, perhaps that happened when you lived alone in the forest. Besides, they were very kind to her. Inga wanted to help with the washing, but she was not allowed to. Her hands were much too soft, said the washerwife. But if Inga could cook a little something for them, she would be so glad. So the girl made porridge and gruel, and fried pancakes, and baked bread, and all of it delighted the woman and her son. She tidied up the cottage, both her own little room and the kitchen, where the mother and son lived, and the cottage began to look more homely. Soon as Mother Troll had seen the girl standing so gracefully and fair by the dark lakeside, she had decided that she was just the wife for her son. She lost no time in confiding this to him. Most of the time, the son did not pay much attention to what his mother said, but the more he watched Inga doing her chores, the more he hoped his mother was right. As for Inga, she found the boy's brooding gaze and desire to please her uncomfortable, and although she could tell he longed for kindness, she fought hard to be friendly toward him. Inga was walking in the forest one day thinking on this, and on Mother Troll's odd blinkings and wry faces she made at times. I cannot bear to stay with them for much longer, she thought. But where can I go? As she made her way along the forest path, she met the last person she wanted to see, the Queen's young page. When she was banished as a thief, it had pained her most of all that her friend, the young page, believed she was a thief. She turned her head away and quickly took another path, but the page ran after her. "Good morning, Miss Inga. I have been looking for you for so long to tell you that I know you are innocent." She stopped and regarded him, her eyes full with tears. At last someone believed her. "Come with me," he begged, "to meet my mother. In a few days' time, when I inherit my estate, will you marry me?" Inga shook her head. "Your reputation would be ruined if you married me, but thank you. Thank you so much for believing in me." The young page tried to keep her from running away and asked her at least to tell him where she lived, but Inga was firm. "You must not follow me," she said, and hurried away through the forest. Now, the troll boy, as usual, had followed Inga that day. Hidden behind a boulder, he had seen her talking to the young page. He was overcome with sadness and shambled off to the cottage, hanging his head. Mother Troll was there, examining one of the princess's little dresses with great delight. It had the most exquisite lace, fine as spiderweb. "Look at this one," she called to her son. "Won't your pretty little baby look fine in it?" The son hissed at her angrily. "Be quiet, mother. Do you think that girl could ever like me? Look at my straggly hair and my wide mouth and my big hairy hands." He was shouting, and in his misery he banged his head so hard against the cottage wall that it shook. Now," said his mother, "leave it to me. You hurry off to the castle with the washing, and don't forget to distract them with the troll rhyme when they count it. For this one I am going to keep." And she tucked the small dress in her chest and banged the lid shut. For a while now she had not dared keep any of the princess's clothes, having learned of the fuss at the castle, but this one she simply could not resist. Well, not long after the boy left, Inga entered the cottage. "Listen, little Inga," said the washerwife in a mild voice, cocking her head. "How would it be if you and Drule married?" When she saw the frightened look in the girl's eyes, she rushed on. "Come here, little Inga, and I will show you something." With a sly look, she opened the chest. "Have you ever in your life seen anything so lovely? These are for your little babies when you marry Drule." Inga gave a cry of anguish. "But those are the princess's dresses." "So they are," said the old woman contentedly. "But, mother," Inga said, "don't you understand that you are stealing?" "Stealing?" barked the old woman angrily. "People have such strange words. We take what we can get." "Have you never learned that it is wrong to steal?" asked Inga in horror. "I am not going to listen," the washerwife snapped. She flashed Inga a sly, green-eyed look, snatched the small clothes, and threw them back in the chest. She was so agitated that her tail came loose as she bent over the chest, and Inga saw it plain as day. The girl sat down on the bench, stiff with fear. The old woman banged the chest shut and stormed out the door, her tail lashing behind. "Have the coffee ready when I come back," she shouted. "Now I must do the washing." But as soon as Troll Mother left, Inga hurried from the cottage. She had to get away, far, far away from the trolls. As she ran sobbing through the forest, she trembled with fear at the thought of having lived so long with them. She ran right into the young page, who was wandering there sadly, wondering where she had gone. This time she did not run, but stood close by his side and murmured something about being afraid of trolls. He put his hand to his sword at once and asked, "Trolls, where are they?" "No, no, you must not hurt them," Inga protested. "They have been good to me. They were the only ones who took me in when I was homeless." Then the page asked once more to let him take her to his mother, and this time she was far too tired to refuse. Well, the young page's mother was a wise and good woman, and saw immediately that Inga needed help. She did not question her, only put Inga to bed, and looked after her as though she were her own daughter. Meanwhile, Drule drove up to the king's castle with a scowl on his face. He was thinking of the young page, and when the washing was counted, he completely forgot to mumble the troll rhyme. He did not wake from his brooding until he realized the lady-in-waiting was asking, sharply and repeatedly, "Where is the princess's christening robe?" Then the boy realized something was wrong. Oh, he said, scratching his head. "I must have forgotten it. I'll go home for it." He drove home 4 miles to the cottage, but neither his mother nor Inga were there. He opened the chest and poked around in it. If only he knew which of these frilly garments were the missing christening robe. To be safe, he stuffed a number of garments in his pocket and set out again. He entered the royal kitchen and held up a small jacket. "Is this the one?" he asked. The housekeeper looked at him in amazement. Stupidly, he brought out more of the little clothes. "Is it one of these?" The housekeeper signaled the cook to fetch the lady in waiting. She came in a hurry, but the troll boy noticed nothing amiss until he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. It was a palace guard who had been summoned to arrest the thief and put him in the tower. Only then did Drula come to his senses and realized what he had done. Alight with rage, he kicked one guard and hit another with his fist. They both tumbled to the floor, and with a quick jump, he leapt up into his cart and drove away full tilt. By the time the guards had collected their wits to follow him, Drula was out of sight, and when at last they reached the little cottage beside the lake, it was empty and deserted. The crooked door was squeaking on its hinges, and some half-dry laundry, which belonged to the sheriff's wife, was blowing in the wind. Now the people in the castle realized just how unjustly they had accused Inga. The queen reproached herself for being cruel and wanted to search for the little girl. Imagine her joy when her page announced that he knew where Inga was. Immediately he was ordered to ride out and bring her back, and when Inga learned that the thieves had been discovered, but that both trolls had escaped, she was happy and quickly felt much better. Joyfully she followed the page to the castle. The queen received Inga there with open arms and kissed both her cheeks, and everyone was kind to her. The queen wanted to know all of her adventures, and after listening to them she said, "I had hoped to take you back to my court in the city and educate you as my lady-in-waiting, but now I have heard your story, I wonder if you would rather marry my page." Inga had fallen in love with the page and much preferred to marry him, so the queen appointed him the royal forester and built them a handsomest house with a view of the small lake and the forest. The troll's cottage was razed to the ground. One autumn evening, when Inga had been married a year or so, she was sitting with her husband, looking happily at their tiny child, asleep in her lap. Then she suddenly thought she heard a long sigh. She looked up and saw 4 melancholy troll eyes peering at her through the window. She gave a startled cry, and her husband woke and ran outside to see if anyone was there, but he saw no one, and only the sound of the wind answered his calls. He was about to go back indoors when he saw something white on the steps. It was a bundle of laundry, the rest of the princess's dresses. Well, that was the last time the trolls were ever seen in the region. Most thought they must have followed the other trolls to the forest in the northern wilderness, but Inga thought of Mother Troll and Drula sometimes, and could not help wishing that they were living a happy and comfortable life. The end.